Welcome to the video on the low-rate starter home trap and whether you should sell or become a break-even landlord. We will examine how a low mortgage rate can mask poor investment performance and how to run a rigorous audit before converting a primary residence into a rental. By the end, you will be able to decide whether to sell, rent, or reinvest your equity more effectively. First, we will outline why low mortgage rates can mislead owners about the investment quality of their starter homes. Next, we will frame the core decision question. Then, we will walk through a rental audit checklist. After that, we will study a numerical example, review helpful diagrams, and compare selling versus renting. Finally, we will test your knowledge and close with key takeaways and next steps. Although a sub 4% mortgage rate feels like a winning asset, that rate alone does not guarantee a good investment. If the rental barely breaks even, a single major repair or a few months of vacancy can eliminate years of minimal profits and even force you to subsidize the property. Therefore, we need to look deeper at cash flow, reserves, and opportunity cost before converting a primary home into a rental. Here is the core decision test. If you sold the home today and had the cash equity in your account, would you immediately buy this exact property as a rental? If your answer is no, then the equity is likely misallocated. Strong real estate investments produce positive, stress-tested cash flow and do not rely on optimistic assumptions. Additionally, remember that your time and management bandwidth are limited, and marginal rentals can consume both without rewarding you adequately. Now let us perform a rental audit. First, gather all relevant numbers including rent comps, mortgage principal and interest, property taxes, insurance, HOA dues, utilities, and property management fees. Second, apply realistic reserves by using a vacancy rate of 5 to 8% or the local average and budgeting 10% of gross rent for repairs. Third, compute net operating income by subtracting vacancy and operating expenses from rent while excluding mortgage principal and interest. Fourth, compute cash flow by subtracting the mortgage principal and interest from the net operating income. Fifth, add a capital expenditure reserve of 5 to 10% for large items like roof, HVAC, or plumbing systems. Sixth, stress test the model by allowing for 1 to 2 months of vacancy during a year and one major repair over 3 to 5 years. Seventh, account for opportunity cost by comparing the annual cash flow to what your after-tax sale proceeds could earn in diversified, liquid investments. Finally, evaluate whether you have the time and systems to manage the property without compromising your primary financial goals. Here is a sample monthly case study. Gross rent is $2,400. Vacancy reserve at 8% is $192. Repairs reserve at 10% is $240. Property management at 8% is $192. Mortgage principal and interest is $1,350. Property taxes are $350. Insurance is $120. HOA or other expenses are $60. Net cash flow is negative $104 per month. This demonstrates that a seemingly solid property with a low interest rate can still be cash flow negative after realistic reserves and expenses. Beyond monthly line items, several hidden costs often turn a break-even projection negative. Capital expenditures such as HVAC, roof, sewer line, foundation, or electrical issues require significant reserves. Tenant turnover introduces costs for painting, flooring, deep cleaning, and leasing fees. Vacancy is a real risk, with 1 to 2 months between tenants plus marketing and processing time. Your personal time is also a hidden tax, consumed by phone calls, scheduling, vendor coordination, and dispute resolution. Finally, when equity is tied up in a second illiquid property, your flexibility to pursue better opportunities is reduced. This mind map organizes the decision. We begin with the central decision and branch to goals including retirement gaps, liquidity, and simplicity. Next, we consider property metrics, such as rent comparables, vacancy, repairs at 10%, property management fees, taxes, insurance, and HOA dues. We then evaluate cash flow via net operating income, mortgage principal and interest, and stress testing. The risk branch covers capital expenditure events, vacancy shocks, and tenant or legal risks. Alternatives include selling now, reinvesting in diversified assets, or purchasing a more suitable rental later. The outcome node summarizes that if cash flow is robust and you have management capacity, you may rent. Otherwise, selling is favored. This sequence diagram illustrates the monthly cash flow. The tenant pays rent to the property manager on the first of the month. The manager allocates funds to fees, repair reserves, and the vacancy reserve. Expenses are then directed to the lender for principal and interest, and to the city or insurer for taxes and insurance through escrow. Whatever remains is sent to the owner, which may be small or negative. An unexpected repair, such as a $6,000 HVAC replacement, triggers additional outflows from the owner's savings and creates administrative overhead at tax time. This pie chart shows how total monthly expenses are distributed. About 54% goes to principal and interest payments. Roughly 14% covers property taxes. Insurance consumes nearly 5%, while HOA accounts for about 2.5%. Vacancy reserves and property management fees each take around 7 to 8%, and the repairs reserve is about 10%. Combined, these categories often absorb or exceed the rental income, leaving little to no positive cash flow. Let us compare selling versus renting. Selling now unlocks equity for diversified, liquid investments, allows accelerated retirement contributions, and simplifies your financial life, preserving flexibility for future opportunities. Its stress-adjusted returns may be higher when the rental would be marginal. Renting out can offer appreciation and mortgage amortization, and may provide tax benefits if cash flow is robust. However, it requires meaningful reserves for capital expenditures and vacancy, and it adds management time and risk. If the property only breaks even, a single repair can wipe out multiple years of profits. Quiz time. What recurring reserve should you typically budget at around 10% of gross rent when evaluating a rental? Is it property taxes, vacancy, repairs and maintenance, or mortgage principal? You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is repairs and maintenance. Budgeting approximately 10% of gross rent for repairs helps prevent unexpected expenses from eliminating thin cash flow. Second quiz. If you would not use your equity to buy the same house as a rental today, what is the recommended move? Keep it because the rate is low, rent it and hope appreciation saves you, sell it and redeploy equity into diversified investments, or self-manage to avoid fees? You may pause the video now to consider. We will discuss the answer in the next section. The correct answer is to sell and redeploy equity into diversified, liquid investments. A low interest rate should not anchor you to an underperforming asset. Freeing your equity allows you to fund higher priority goals like retirement. These are the key takeaways. A low mortgage rate does not compensate for weak cash flow. Run a rigorous audit that includes vacancy, repairs, management, taxes, insurance, and HOA costs. Stress test your numbers and include capital expenditure reserves. If you would not buy the property today as a rental with your equity, then selling is likely the better option. Use proceeds to fund tax-advantaged retirement accounts and diversified investments. Simplifying your finances preserves flexibility for better opportunities later. Here is a practical checklist. First, pull at least 3 rent comparables and set a realistic vacancy rate between 5 and 8%. Second, budget repairs at 10% of gross rent and include a capital expenditure reserve for large systems. Third, compute net operating income by subtracting vacancy and operating expenses from rent, and then compute cash flow by subtracting principal and interest. Fourth, annualize cash flow and compare it to your net sale proceeds to estimate cash-on-cash returns. Fifth, stress test the model by adding 2 months of vacancy and 1 major repair. Finally, apply the core question and decide whether you would buy this as a rental today using your equity. In summary, do not let a low mortgage rate decide for you when the rental math is fragile. Run a complete audit, stress test the numbers, and be honest about your time constraints. If the answer to the core question is no, then selling and redeploying your equity is likely the superior choice. Ultimately, pursue positive, stress-tested cash flow, or choose simpler and more liquid investment paths. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, or legal advice. Before making decisions, consult qualified professionals who can evaluate your specific circumstances, taxes, risk tolerance, and goals. Thanks for watching. If this helped, please like, share, and subscribe. Share your scenario in the comments, and I may model it in a future video. Until next time, make confident, numbers-first decisions.